Absolutely. Talk about healthy dating. Like, what is the concept behind that? Like, what does healthy dating look like?
Well, to understand healthy dating, we have to understand unhealthy dating, which is 90% of what's taught. So we're going to start with unhealthy dating. And what I mean by that, Trey, is if you ask most people out there, prior to 3 years ago, prior to a movement taking place in this country that has taken place recently, but even to this day, if you ask most people, you're all alone with someone, you feeling the connection, do you look them in the eyes and ask for a kiss, or do you lean in and go for it? To this day, most people still say, you go for it. Well, how do you know if they didn't want it? Well, I mean, they push you away, they tell you. So you've already done it to them, and now they just have to defend themselves from you if they don't want it. That's the system we've set up. We've set up a system that's based on, and when you write it down, when you put one person's sexually advances on the other until they stop them, most people go, oh my gosh, when you say it out loud like that, it sounds like a predator.
You're currently listening to Mike Domitrz, and in 1989, Mike received a phone call that his sister had been raped. As he held the phone tightly to his ears, he simply could not believe what he was hearing. In the years following, Mike decided to make a difference. As he researched the issue of sexual assault and sexual intimacy, he constantly heard people of various backgrounds and demographics complaining that most sexual assault seminars were boring and depressing. Mike knew what needed to be done. With his background in entertainment, he created a fun, interactive, and thought-provoking program that focused on why, asking first, and respecting the answer makes all the difference. His programs became known for providing participants specific how-to skills that they could and would want to implement immediately into their lives. I'm very fired up about my conversation with Mike Domitrz, so let's get this thing started, guys. Let's get after it. This is Your Superior Self, episode 77, the Center for Respect with American educator Mike Domitrz. What is up, Superior Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Your Superior Self. I'm your host, Trey Downs, and thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading this episode. Thank you for hanging out with me today. If this is your first time listening to the episode, please leave a rating and a review and hit that little button that says subscribe. It helps out the podcast. It helps me scale this show so that way I can reach more entrepreneurs and people like you listening that may need a little inspirational motivation. And that is my co-host, Kara, in the background. Yes, she is excited about this conversation. Mike Domitrz, he is a true American educator, and he is here today to help talk about boundaries and respecting each other and having a clear set of rules when it comes to dating. And I also want to give a shout out to author Jen Sincero, the author of You Are a Badass Every Day. I was getting up and I was reading my daily excerpt from her book, and this is what she had to say to me today. Whatever you got on repeat becomes our reality. What we look at every day, our thoughts, what we read, listen to, talk about, tell ourselves, etc. This repetition is reality concept is the reason that repeating affirmations is so effective. Why looking at your vision board over and over again is so powerful. Why hanging out with kick-ass people who talk about kick-assery is so important. Why being diligent about being grateful is so transformative. Why putting post-it notes all over your house that say, I'm special, I am loved, I am worthy, and then frantically running from room to room, ripping them down when you realize your friends are at the door is so worth the risk. Take stock of what you got on auto loop and upgrade anything that's not supporting your quest for greatness. Pay attention to what comes out of your mouth when you talk to your coworkers, the thoughts that go through your mind when you look in the mirror or browse a dating site or watch TV. How do the books you read, the podcasts you listen to, the food you eat, the newspapers you read, the people you hang out with make you feel? It's crazy how you read something like that and you automatically resonate with it, and I couldn't agree more with her words and her message. I've created a self-mastery group called Your Superior Mastery Group, and the guys in that group fully hold me accountable for my projects, my courses, for my vision, and they help me push myself to be the best version of myself when I'm feeling lazy or when I'm not feeling motivated or when I'm lost on my path. And I highly suggest that if you're not a part of a mastery group, self-mastery group, or a mastermind, I highly suggest that you find one, or at least get a group of guys or girls that are going to support you in your endeavors and support you and hold you accountable for your goals. If you are an entrepreneur who needs help finding a community that will support you in all your endeavors, please reach out to me. You can message me at yoursuperiorself.com and I will help you connect with a group like that. So yeah, I'm excited about today's conversation. Some good stuff in this episode. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Mike Domitrz. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back, Superior Nation. I'm excited about my guest tonight, Mike Domitrz. He is a author. He is a American educator. He's a publisher and founder of the Date Safe Project. Mike, thank you so much for joining the show, buddy.
Thank you. And actually, we have breaking news because just this past week, the Date Safe Project changed its name. We are now the Center for Respect.
Center of Respect. Now, why the change?
The change, a couple reasons, actually. So one was that we have branched out over the years. We started doing this work in schools and universities. The Date Safe Project worked well. Then over time, we started working a lot with the U.S. military, and it worked, but you're dealing with generals and admirals and leaders saying, what's this, the Date Safe Project? What is that? So it'd be a little bit harder to have that transition sometimes to understand what we're doing. And then we started working corporate. And corporate hears Date Safe and thinks, what does that have to do with us? So that was the real shift. We wanted a name that could allow everybody to see exactly what we do and feel really comfortable working with us. Even schools nowadays are so scared of these topics that when they see Date Safe Project, they're like, oh, we can't address dating. There's too much controversy and sensitivity around it. And just by changing the name helps them feel safer. The same exact programs don't change at all, but the name of the organization just makes them feel safer. And so the Center for Respect, everything we talk about is focused on respect in some way, some form. That's the foundation. So it was the perfect blend into shifting our name to that.
So explain to me, how did you come about with the Date Safe Project? I know it's transitioning to the new name and you're going to push that out there for your brand, but how did you come up with the idea?
Well, originally what happened was I started doing this work when I was 21 years old. And what it was I was a college student when I was 19. And I was away from home at college. And I received a phone call that the youngest of my older sisters had been raped. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And I was lost, confused, angry, hurt. And about 6 months later, I would hear a speaker on my college campus. And back then it was unheard of for colleges to talk about this topic. And I heard this speaker and I thought, I want to do that. And I went to that speaker and said that. And he said, okay, well, show up. I'll give you what I got. Well, I showed up and they said, nobody ever shows up. You showed up. I'll give you what I got. And I wrote a speech from all the material he gave me and went to a local high school that I graduated from, talked to a teacher and said, can I give this program? And I did. She said, yes, thankfully I did. And she's like, this is what you should be doing. And that's 28 years ago. And that's what I started doing. And it wasn't a smooth path. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like from 19 to now 49. This is what I did all along the way. There was a roller coaster ride to get here, but the last 18 years, this is what I've done full time.
What have been some of the biggest challenges for you?
Oh, there were so many along the path. So when I started doing this work, as I was saying, I was 19 when this happened, but I was 21 when I started speaking out. I looked like I was in high school, and I did not even look like a senior in high school. I looked really young. So that was a problem because schools were not addressing these topics. And so the odds that they were going to address it for the very first time with someone who looked very young was very slim. And I was still a student. I didn't have a degree. And so back then, peer education was sort of new, cutting edge. It wasn't the norm. And so we constantly ran into roadblocks. And then I graduated. I was 24. They didn't believe I was even out of high school. People would say, oh, I was like, I'd have my sister's kids with me, that kind of thing. And they'd be like, oh, that's cute. You're babysitting while you're in high school. And I'm like, I'm a college graduate. So I had to step out of it for a while. I did it full time through college. And the year after college, I started my own business full time doing it, but just struggled. And 8 years later, I had group of speakers see me do it and say, hey, why aren't you doing this everywhere? And I gave them the backstory, and they were like, the world's changed. The world's changed. They're looking for people like you to do what you do. This was back in 2002. And in 2 weeks, I sold the business that I owned in my life at that time and almost went bankrupt over the next 6 months. But we believed in what we were doing. My wife and I both believed in what we were doing, and it started to take off the following year, and it just grew and grew and grew. And that's really been, from 2002 to now. So the last 17 years, we're just living it full time.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. Taking that leap of faith. Like, did you ever doubt that this would take off? Did you ever have concerns that you wouldn't be able to make this successful?
Oh my gosh, yes. So in 2002, when I went to my first national professional trade organization conference, there were a lot of speakers there, and they said, well, hey, you're this new speaker. What are you going to speak on? And as soon as I would say it, people like, yeah, you might want to keep a full-time job and do that, slowly like a hobby. So people did not see the vision I saw. Even when I shared it, they're like, you might be a little too optimistic there. I always believed it would get there. Did I along the way question whether I should continue on the path? Absolutely. And here's why. There were times where financially we were stretched beyond all belief, which leads to stress beyond all belief. And then you got to look in the mirror and go, we have 4 kids and we're trying to make this work. Am I doing the right thing? And those moments of financial, am I doing the right thing, are sometimes the toughest moments, because I knew in my heart I loved what I was doing and I belonged to what I was doing.
What would your advice be to those that are in those moments, that are in those tough moments financially? I mean, I have a small family, and there are times where I doubt my abilities and I doubt my path. I mean, what would you say to people like us?
I say you got to really know why you're on the path. And that was the one thing that kept us going, because my wife met me in college while I was doing this work. So she knew the vision years before that point was occurring in 2002, a decade before that. And we were on the same page, and we were I was painting the vision for her, not just for me. So we were on the same vision of where that was headed. If you don't have a clear reason you're on the path, I would argue you shouldn't be on the path if it's putting you in that much dire stress, financial strain. Maybe get off the path and realign what you need to do before you get back on that path. We knew I loved addressing these topics, addressing consent, supporting survivors, bystander intervention. Those 3 things have always been part of our program, and they still are this many years later. We knew that, and that's what kept it going. We believed in what we were doing, and every time we did something, as far as the speaking we were doing, the programs we were doing, the feedback was, oh my gosh, this is awesome. So what we had to figure out was, well, if everybody's loving it so much, why is it struggling to get traction? But we knew they were loving it. So it's just figuring out, how do we get the traction to make the biggest impact out there?
So I want to talk about more about you and your background. Now, in 1989, you found out that your sister had been raped. Talk a little bit about that. Like, what was the... when you found out, talk about the steps that happened after.
Well, I was away at school. I wasn't at the local college. And so I heard over the phone, which it was the only way for me to hear, but it's a tough way to hear, because there's no one to give you a hug. There's no one's eyes to look into as you're hearing this news to see how they're doing. I couldn't see my sister. This wasn't a day and age where now I could FaceTime, right? You couldn't do that back then. So you're sitting there and you have this phone call occurring, and you're hearing each other, but you can't be there. You can't give them a hug. They can't give you a hug. And so there's a lot of pain and confusion. And that's what I went through for several months. I went from an honor student to not being even close to an honor student, because I was struggling emotionally, and I was struggling then in my grades and my focus. So I transferred colleges to be close to home near my sister during the trial, because in this case, the perpetrator was caught and was up for so many years that I wanted to be there for my sister. So I moved home to be there for my sister. And in the trial, this person was convicted and will live out their sentence in prison. So on the end of, when you look at what justice survivors get out there, that's not always the norm. So that was good. It did not, though, make you feel better. It did not erase what happened. And so I had this anger, I had this confusion, and that's when I heard that speaker helped me realize, wait, I can do something about this. So I started out as an angry brother, activist speaking out. And then I soon realized Anger isn't working. Like that's just not working. And when I would do these little interactive parts of my programs in classrooms, a teacher pulled me aside and said, when you do that, Mike, they really light up. They really engage. And that's when I realized it was Jerry Witherall. We're still friends to this day. He's an amazing college professor, and he retired now. And he was a big guidance in my life at that point. And he helped me realize what was working. He would constantly bring me into all his classes. So that was great. And I'd get that feedback, and I would just listen and do I'd do whatever the feedback was, and I'd do more of that and stay away from the stuff that wasn't working. And that's how I just kept working it so I could have the most effective impact. And that was the goal, right? We wanted the biggest impact.
Absolutely. Talk about healthy dating. Like, what is the concept behind that? Like, what does healthy dating look like?
Well, to understand healthy dating, we have to understand unhealthy dating, which is 90% of what's taught. So we're going to start with unhealthy dating. And what I mean by that, Trey, is if you ask most people out there, prior to 3 years ago, prior to a movement taking place in this country that has taken place recently, but even to this day, if you ask most people, you're all alone with someone, you feeling the connection, do you look them in the eyes and ask for a kiss, or do you lean in and go for it? To this day, most people still say, you go for it. Well, how do you know if they didn't want it? Well, I mean, they push you away, they tell you. So you've already done it to them, and now they just have to defend themselves from you if they don't want it. That's the system we've set up. We've set up a system that's based on, and when you write it down, when you put one person sexually advances on the other until they stop them, most people go, oh my gosh, when you say it out loud like that, it sounds like a predator. We're taught to be predatorial. So the biggest part of this problem is what our society has been teaching for so long is you go for it, you go for it. And the defense out there is, well, yeah, because if they don't want it, they can always stop you. That's their choice. See, they have a choice, but that's not a choice. That's called self-defense. And when you say that out loud, audiences laugh of all ages, middle schoolers, 24-year-olds, 45-year-olds will go, oh my gosh, that's awful that you're right, we do that. We say your choice is whether to defend yourself or not. But choice actually means I'm part of the decision before it occurs. And when you ask audience, hey, if you have a kid and they're 16 years old and they're about to be sexually active, or 18 years old, do you hope they're always given a choice before somebody does something with their body? Every parent says yes. I say, great. So have you taught your kids how to ask for what they want, don't want, to make sure the partner wants or doesn't want it? And they look at you dumbfounded like, whoa, how do you do that? Well, you can't expect your kids to have a choice when you raise them in a society that never teaches them how to have a choice.
I have 3 kids now. One of them just turned 9, and my daughter is still 6, will be 7 this year. I have a little bit of time before I start worrying about the first kiss, but I'm glad that I'm talking to you today because I don't know how I would deal with that. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, that first kiss, you always hear about people going in for it, and if she kisses you back, obviously you didn't offend her, or she wanted to receive it. But how do you teach? I mean, what is it? Just communication, like?
But even there, we'll stop there, Trey. Yeah, we'll stop there, Trey, because it's a great example. We're taught that if she kisses you back, she must have wanted it. Not true. A lot of the time, she's kissing you back because she's so uncomfortable, she doesn't know what else to do. And when you talk to students about how often have you made out with someone you didn't want to make out with, all genders yell, absolutely have done it. And you say, why? Or even more sexually advanced activity. And you say, why? And they all give the same answer. I don't want to hurt their feelings. So you've got somebody kissing you back who doesn't want to kiss you, but thinks you can't handle the rejection. So they don't tell you they don't want to kiss you because they think it'll hurt you too much. And I don't mean you, Trey. I mean society as a whole, the you. That's how often this is happening. So you were asking, what is healthy dating? Healthy means that I have a skill set, a knowledge, and a maturity about myself that we're not going to do anything with your body or my body that we're not totally comfortable talking about and exploring and having fun with. If we can't do those things, we're not ready. And that's okay. That means we need to slow down until we're ready. Healthy means that it's mutually wanted, or that we agree it's not mutually wanted. That's healthy too. Like, all right, we don't want this. But it's this open line of communication where your boundaries and your answers are respected. That's critical. Most of our world says when someone says no, don't give up. Persistence wins the game. And so we teach kids not to respect the answer. We teach them how to get around it. That's why I tell students all the time, no one's afraid of no. If you were afraid of no, the moment your sexual partner said no, you'd stop. But most people, when their sexual partner says no, say, well, how about a back rub? What about this? Why not? It's been 2 weeks. They look at it as a challenge.
It's that theory of playing hard to get, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah. And think about how unhealthy that is, right? And the hard to get is taught more to one gender than any other gender, and that's to women. And the reason that women were taught play hard to get is because a woman wasn't supposed to be sexually assertive. And think about how messed up that is. Like, wait a second, you want to be sexually active with this person. You want to be sexually intimate with this person, but you have to act like you don't. You have to play this game, and you can't own your sexual voice, because owning your sexual voice would be looking that person in the eyes and going, you know what? I'm so attracted to you right now. I'd love to kiss you. May I? And most partners would be like, yes, like that would not ruin the moment. They'd be like, oh my gosh, I would love that if I'm into you. They would love this. But we've instead said to a lot of people, no, don't do that. Don't do that. That'd be exercising your voice. You don't want to give that impression that you have a voice, a sexual voice. Make them chase you. And so it's a game instead of let's communicate. Let's have fun by being mature and not playing the games of confusion and awkwardness, but just being upfront and honest and getting to enjoy the intimacy instead of the mind games that people play.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see that in marriages too, right?
Oh my goodness. So we do, as I told you, we do work with corporations, organizations, U.S. military. So I have audiences sometimes where the room is 40 to 65. And people, when they hear what I do for a living, think I'm always talking to, 15-year-olds or 20-year-olds. No, there are days where everyone in the room is 40 and older. And when I talk about this stuff, we get as much laughter, if not more, from the married couples of the stupid assumptions they make. And I'm not saying they're stupid. I'm saying they admit the stupid assumptions they've been taught in marriage that lead to messed up understandings. I'll give you a classic example that we talk about. Two married people go to bed. They're both horny. They are laying naked in bed right next to each other. However, neither's told the other one they're horny. What happens? Do they just turn around, start talking and saying, do you want to do this? No. They lay there naked right next to each other, waiting for the other one to initiate the action. Now, when the other one doesn't initiate, do they start to talk? Nope. Now they start to get angry that the other one's not initiating the action, to the point they fall asleep, wake up the next morning pissed off they didn't get laid last night. And literally all they had to do was roll over and go, want to? Last night. And it would have happened. It would have totally happened.
Wasted a perfect opportunity.
Yeah. And when you say that in front of an audience, the whole audience is like, oh my gosh, were you in my bedroom last night? Like, because it's so common, right? But this is a married couple of 30 years, and they don't have the skills to look each other in the eye and say, want to have some fun right now? Or what would you love for me to do for you right now? They don't have the skill. And that's not their fault. Our society has failed to teach it. And that's part of what we do.
Why do you think that? I mean, like, all right, in that instance, like, I can only speak on the male behalf, but like, why do you? All right, so I don't think that I'm afraid to voice. Maybe I am. I don't know. Maybe I just feel like maybe I don't want to bother her, right? Like, I want it, but I don't want to bother her. I don't want to put her, I don't know, because I feel like as men we naturally want it more than women, right? And
so let's pause. That can be a myth. So that's part of it, that for a guy to think, well, I want it more than she does. You might want it. You might think of how you want it differently than she does. That doesn't mean she wants it less. There's a big difference there. And we have to be careful here, because we're saying he, she, but in our work, we say partner, because it could be he, she, she. We could have any combination of their pronouns. So that's important to understand. So the ironic part is when you lay there in bed thinking, I don't know if they want it, maybe they don't want it, I don't want to annoy them. If you had just asked and they said not in the mood, and you said, okay, over, done with, you have all that stress gone. But instead, this game goes on in the mind for up to 10, 15 minutes while you're laying next to this person. You could have in 10 seconds ended that. Like if they really weren't in the mood, you could have just, the moment you asked, hey, you in the mood tonight? And they're like, nope. And you say, okay, well, I don't have to get my hopes up. That ain't happening, right? So it actually makes it easier, and it's nice because your partner gets to see you respect the answer.
Yeah, sure.
That's so powerful, because what the partner's afraid of is that you're going to ask, hey, you in the mood tonight? And if they say no, they're afraid they have to deal with the martyrdom that's done, the guilt, like, well, why not? Or, I've had a long day, and you don't respect the answer. When you respect the answer and people know you're going to respect the answer, they'll get right to it, right? They'll get right to the answer. So no thanks. If you've built a healthy relationship, they can just say no thanks. If they start to say, well, this or that, they start to give a reason, like, I'm tired, I'm this. A healthy thing to teach your partner is, you don't have to give me a reason. I've got a headache. You don't need to say that. You can just say no. That's the only answer I need. I don't want you to ever think you have to explain yourself to me. If you don't want to, you don't want to. Here's the mistake that a lot of us make when our partner says no to sex. We say to ourselves in our head, they don't want to have sex with me right now. Well, that's not at all what's happening potentially. They don't want to have sex with anybody right now. Well, we get in our heads that we take it personal. They don't want to have sex with me. Why don't they want to have sex with me? Instead of, oh, they don't want to have sex. As soon as you erase the with me, it's not personal. And then you shouldn't take it as personal.
I mean, these are all great points. I mean, I've never really thought about that, but I mean, nobody's really taught us that, right? I mean, I know growing up, I didn't have that conversation with my parents. I had a sex education class, and that was nowhere near as educational as I would have liked. But I kind of think that you probably run into that problem quite a bit. I mean, we're not mentored in this area.
Yeah, when we're with older audiences, like I'm describing, and older's my age, by the way, at these ages I'm talking about, 40 and above. So when you run into them, they're the ones saying, why didn't we get this sooner? Well, what's unfortunate yet wonderful at the same time is how simple these solutions are, right? What I'm sharing is very simple solutions. And what's unfortunate is that we didn't teach it sooner. The wonderful part about it is it's so simple, everybody can go home and use this right away. You can implement this in your life right away. You don't need a book. Like, people come say to me, well, when you're done speaking, do you have lines of people waiting for you? And what we learned over the years was, no, we don't. And the reason why our audiences would put in surveys, it's so simple. I've got what I need when I walk out when Mike's done. Like, I don't think I need to go read a whole book to understand what he just taught me. He made it simple. He made it doable. And I want to try this. I want to do the right thing. And so when you make it simple and easily implementable, people will use it. And that's what we got to do. We got to give people simple, implementable skills for sexual intimacy, decision-making, respecting boundaries.
How can I, as a parent, be effective when I have that conversation with my kids? Like when they get old enough and I need to start having the talk about sex or dating or, even kissing, for instance. I mean, what is it that
so you're going to start it now. But you're not going to talk about when they kiss someone else necessarily. You could. But what I mean by that is you're going to teach your children, when they have the ability to communicate through their own words, through their own means, that you will ask them before you give them a hug or a kiss. When they have the ability to communicate. Now, that's different than a baby who needs your love and cannot communicate that, right? There's difference there. But when they have the ability to communicate, you want to teach them, hey, I want you to know that I always want to honor your body and your boundaries, and no one has the right to touch you without your permission. And certain parts of you, it is not okay for people. So you can teach them boundaries, right? You can teach them this. And where this is beautiful is that as a child gets older and they get to 4 and 5, and the common move at grandma and grandpa's house is go give grandma a hug, go give grandma a kiss. And the child might look at you and go, I don't want to. And parents will go, you do it. They love you. Now the child learns at 4 or 5 that if someone loves me, I owe them intimacy. And people go, what's wrong with that? That's exactly the language a predator will use. They will say, if you love me, you would do this with me. Right? So you have to be very careful of teaching the exact same lessons. And people go, well, whoa, you're comparing grandma to a predator. No. We're comparing the mindset of you owe grandma intimacy, even though it's not sexual intimacy, loving intimacy, you owe it, versus you express intimacy as a way to share emotion. It should not be owed. And my mom taught me that years ago. I remember this is, my kids are older, but 2 decades ago. And I remember saying to one of my kids, oh, give grandma a kiss. And my mom said, if they don't want to, why would I want that? What is that giving me? Right. And that was a great lesson for me to learn. So for every parent out there, start to think, okay, am I asking my child for a hug or a kiss because I want them to express loving intimacy? Or am I forcing it because I want to make myself feel loved? So I'm forcing them to give this to me. Or I'm forcing them to give grandma a hug or a kiss because they have to make grandma feel better. Versus, no, they don't. That's not their job. So it's an interesting conversation to have with people. And it's interesting. People can get very defensive about it. But as kids get older, they look back and go, oh, I wish I'd taught it sooner. Because here's the beautiful part about it. As your kids get older, now let's say they're 9 or 10, and you say, can I have a hug? And your child's mad at you, and they say no. And you honor the answer, suddenly no is powerful in that child's mind. They have the right to say no. And so now they got a gift of a lesson they would have never gotten in many homes. But they learned that no is powerful and no is not bad. And I have the right to say no. Most places in our society, children are taught not to say no. Obey. Do as the adult says. So you're not given opportunities to say no when it comes to their personal being. When you can teach it in the home, oh my goodness, so powerful.
That is powerful. Let's move up the time frame here. All right. So that's a nice baseline. That is something that I can work on now. Permission to kiss.
Same with their bodies, by the way.
Okay, so let's say I have a 13-year-old and they're starting to get into that dating realm and starting to think about sexual contact. Like, what would you say to that parent then?
Let's say that first of all, let's back you up a couple of years. The average child right now has seen porn by the age of 10.
What?
Yes, 10 or 11. Not intentionally, necessarily. Yeah, think about how often, Trey, you've Googled something and ran into something you didn't mean to Google. Right?
Sure, yeah. Happens all the time.
Right. So the 11-year-old does the same thing. The 10-year-old does the same thing. They're now showing numbers as low as 8 in some research. So you have to start thinking, how am I teaching my child what the human body is, what sexuality is at a younger age, just so that they ever run into it, they know they have some sort of a lens to understand they're seeing an unhealthy version. So I just throw out there to be careful of waiting until they're 13 because it can be late.
Sure. All right. So that's a great point. I'm going to be vulnerable here. I do feel uncomfortable when my son asks about it, right? And it's kind of, my easy answer is it is your private place, right? And
so let's pause. That language is what most of us were taught to teach our kids. So you're just doing what we were taught, right? Here's the danger. By saying private place, and moms and dads do this for all genders, I'll give you the problem of that. The child cannot even identify their own body for what it is. And if somebody ever does violate them, the child in court struggles to name. So one thing that people who teach healthy body imagery for children will teach at a very young age, they'll say, look, when you're teaching your child hand, nose, why aren't you saying penis in the same conversation? It's the exact natural part of the body is the hand and the nose. Why aren't you saying vulva? Why aren't you? These are natural. So the more mysterious we make them, the more we actually sexualize them, right? Which is what you don't want to overly do. So the more you just name them, the less there's sexualization of them. So that younger you can name them and say your penis, your testicles, your vulva, your labia, you can have this conversation. The child will be natural with it. Now, because you're teaching progressively in a way that gives them the ability to understand their body, some parents would be like, hey, I learned from that. I'll say to my kids, now, don't identify people by that. So when you leave home, you don't meet a person who you think has a penis and go, oh, you're a man, you have a penis. Because he's more than just that. You don't say to a woman, oh, you have a vagina. Because parents can tell you stories of, oh, I sat down at dinner and my child just learned, and they sat and went, hi, you must have a penis and you must have a vagina. And everybody got uncomfortable. Now, all the parent needed to do was saying, as you can tell, we're learning our body today, but parents even get freaked out about that. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're teaching that. So the younger, the better. And then when it comes to biology, a lot of schools now are teaching sexual biology by 4th grade in some form or fashion. All right. In biology. So it could be talking about animals and reproduction. Do you see what I'm saying? And so if you teach it scientifically, it doesn't, once again, overly sexualize it. And so it's being smart about how we discuss the things. My wife grew up on a farm. So my kids saw, what they would appear to be a cow on a cow, bull on a cow, and go, what's going on? And when you just state it scientifically, no kid goes, ooh, maybe I can't wait till I get to do that. No, they don't do that. I shouldn't say no kid. Most kids are just going, oh, gross. That's just gross. That type of thing. And so as long as you're appropriate and you keep it scientific, which is what it is at that point, it creates a safer conversation.
So when do you start the sex talk? Like what age?
Yeah,
what age is when you start?
Well, what you do is look in 1st grade, and anybody who's been in an elementary school can tell you, in kindergarten and 1st grade, they're talking about who likes who. So you'll even hear, I'm going out with so-and-so, or they're kissing so-and-so. So when they're going to elementary school, you want to start talking about the difference in a friend and a boyfriend and a girlfriend. If you do that young enough, when they get to middle school and high school, you will have taught this lesson already. It won't be as uncomfortable to broach. And so that's important to understand. What we need more kids to understand is that in middle school and high school, I want to develop friendships. And if I feel a sexual attraction to someone, explore the friendship first. There's almost no state. There's very few states where in middle school, there are a couple, where in middle school you can consent to sexual activity. So I shouldn't be setting you up to be dating where sexual activity could occur. Like I should be setting you up to explore friendships, to learn these friendships, to learn that when I have this attraction to someone, let's first learn the friendship. Let's dive into that and learn that and my boundaries. And so before I dive into the dating and the sexuality of it. And so that's one place to start. So when you get to middle school, you talk about what is going on between some kids. What are some kids experimenting with? What are some kids exploring? What are the dangers of this? Are you ready for this? What's the law on this? Right? And that's what I do in middle schools. We'll say to middle school kids, hey, are kids dating in middle school? And they'll yell yes. And I'll say, what does that mean? And the students will tell you anything from kissing to sex. That's coming from the students. So when parents are like, you're not discussing that. I don't need to. The kids are bringing it up. And you're going, okay, do you think that at this age, most kids are mature enough to understand all the consequences? And the middle schoolers are going, nope, we're not. And do you think they're able to talk about what they like, what they don't like, what they're comfortable with, and their boundaries, especially if they want to please the other person? Nope, no, we're not. So would you say it might be better for us to slow down? And what you're doing is you're helping the kid understand, I'm not ready. I need to slow down. Without you coming in and going, don't you ever do this. If I ever find out you did this in middle school. Because what that does is that becomes live up to my parents' standards. It has nothing to do with making good choices for myself. That's not what I'm hearing as a kid. I'm hearing I better not. It's a demand. It's a lecture. Versus I don't want to. Which is what you want them to get to a place of self-exploration where they recognize I'm not ready. Even if I want to do that right now, I'm not ready. And so I can wait a few years. I'll have time to get ready during that time before it's legal or I'm ready or whatever my parents believe is the boundary. Some parents are going to say not till marriage. Some people are going to believe. But what you have to understand is the kid's going to make their choice. So I work with schools that teach abstinence only, and I work with schools that teach comprehensive sex ed. Because all those parents want their kids' boundaries to be respected. All of them. So it doesn't matter where you're coming from. When you give kids the right skill set, they're going to be better able to really name their boundaries, respect their partner's boundaries. You're going to have a less high-risk sexual activity taking place because they're going to recognize they're not ready or comfortable with that, and they're more likely to wait.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think that the more educated you are, I think that then you have this realization that you're not ready for that, and that is a huge step.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example of that, Trey. We do we have a graphic that we use with parents that we show them, and it's a graphic of a stairway, and the stairway is going up, like from a first floor to a second floor. But in this case, the second floor is one mutually wonderful intimacy, sexual intimacy. That's what's on the second floor, and we're going to say there's anywhere from 9 to 15 steps on this stairway. Every step is an essential component needed for partners to have mutually wonderful intimacy. Start to fill in the steps with your kid. Ask your kid what's needed on the stairway. And it's an amazing conversation. Parents are like, wow, I've never even thought what I need on the stairway. And so suddenly you're discussing communication, but not assumed communication, because a lot of adults, Trey, your age, my age, when you say do you have sexual communication with your partner, they say yes. But as soon as you say, oh, so you two talk about where you like to be licked, how you like to be touched, where, they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, we don't talk that way. I thought you said you had sexual communication. What most adults are calling sexual communication is lack of complaint. They think if I'm not getting complaint, then we have great sexual communication. But usually people aren't complaining because they think you can't handle it. Like you ask most married people, why don't you give your partner more sexual feedback? Well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. They don't think they can handle it. So when you start to put on the stairway verbal communication, that changes the step now. Now people are like, oh, we need to be able to talk. I don't know that I'm comfortable talking. Okay, you're not ready. That's okay. It's not a you're not ready, you better not. It's you're not ready. Good to know. Good to know. What else is on there? Safety. Well, what does that mean? Emotional and physical. Because people go, oh, physical, like use a condom or use this method or whatever. But they forget the emotional. Am I really comfortable with what I'm doing right now? Or am I questioning it as it's happening? That's not emotional safety if I'm questioning it, if I'm fearful, right? Safety. And then you go knowledge. People are like, what do you mean knowledge? What are the odds it's going to be wonderful if these two people have no sexual knowledge? They don't know what makes another person feel good. They don't know how to ask the questions to discover what that person likes. They don't know how to state what they like. What are the odds this is going to be wonderful? And so you start to develop the stairway, and most teenagers and preteens are like, oh my gosh, I'm missing over half the stairs. Half. And we tell you that if you're missing one stair, you're not ready. Because think about if you were missing any one of those things we just brought up, you got problems. You've got a struggle on your hands. So this kind of skill sets, what happens is the kid sees the stairway and they go, wow, I'm not ready. And that's what you just said. The more skills you give, the more they're able to recognize, I want the wonderful mutual. I want that for myself. I want that for my partner, and I'm not ready for it. And so I need to work on whatever it is before I dive into that, right? And it helps them empower themselves to realize what they need, what they don't, what they're not ready for. And it gives them an also good sense of their self, like they're not embarrassed, they're not humiliated, because they also recognize, oh, this is normal for someone my age to be missing, because it's normal for 40-year-olds to be missing some of this. So it makes it a safer space to have conversation.
For you and your wife, was it, I mean, since you started this program, you're well educated in these practices, like, was it hard for you guys to implement it in your relationship, or was she kind of like, all right, this is, he knows about this, he's an expert in this area, I should listen to him? Like, what?
Well, nobody wants to sit there and go, my partner's the expert, so I'm just gonna listen to what they are. I should say no one. Once again, some people might, but look, I had to learn these skills over time too, right? Because society wasn't teaching them. So it wasn't like I came into this relationship with all these skills, right? And because where do you get them? Especially when we were growing up, where were you going to learn these skills? Nobody was teaching them. So a lot of this was practice, right? Learning. And what's great about my work is I go on stage and I challenge an audience about this. And while I'm up there, a new facet comes up. This is 20 years ago, let's say. Not now. Nowadays, you've heard it all just about. But 20 years ago, a new facet comes up. And then I think in my own mind, how does that appear in my life? So then I am going home thinking, do I have that in my relationship? Do we have that in our relationship? And so it helps you grow constantly. Anybody who's ever, I'll give it this way, totally off sexual discussion. Anybody who's ever coached a sport knows the next time they play it after they just taught something, they're thinking about the item they taught the kids. Is the ball going off my fingertips? That's what I just taught an hour ago, is going off my own. You apply it to your own life. So all of this is an ongoing process. Sexual relationships, loving relationships are an ongoing learning process. So I'm still learning along the way. And that's the fun and excitement as I travel the world. Every now and then somebody would say, hey, have you ever heard of this or have you heard of that? We're like, that is awesome. Thanks for sharing. Because we all learn from each other.
Absolutely. I think that's very important, right? I mean, communicating and learning from each other. We are the only species that does. Well, I shouldn't say only species, like whales and elephants do it, but we communicate with each other and we learn from each other. But going back to
and because of that, we are a dangerous species at times.
I love that. Yeah. What do you explain that?
Yeah. So years ago, I was on a safari in South Africa, and a jaguar, in this case, yeah, it was a jaguar. I'm trying to remember, jaguar or leopard comes out in front of our vehicle. You're like, oh my gosh. And the guy's like, calm down, everybody, because the it's an open air vehicle. This animal could jump in, but they teach you the rules of land. They said, one, if it smells the gas of the vehicle, it's not smelling you. So just keep your fingers in, keep your hands in. We're all safe. And we were. But what he said was, it's mating right now. And if you look down there, there's the female. And they're tracking each other. And until that female gives the okay, they're going to keep waiting and tracking and waiting until the female gives okay. Animals follow the rules for the most part. Don't get me wrong. There are exceptions in the animal kingdom where an animal violates other animals as far as sexually. But they tend to follow the rules better. Because we have the ability to communicate, we think we can break the rules. So that's a danger of us in the mating situation. We think, oh, they're not clearly giving the sign, but they want me. I know it because of, and we fill in this other blank over here. We create these stories that we're being communicated differently than we actually are in our brains because we are so high intellect that we can outthink ourselves into dangerous situations. We can actually think ourselves into dangerous situations. And I don't mean blaming the person that something's happening to. I'm talking the one who thinks themselves into acting predatorial. Like, nope, I know what they want. I'm just going to give it to them. That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we definitely are dangerous in that sense. I
mean, think about how often people, when you were growing up, you heard somebody say, did you see how she was dressed?
Yeah.
I mean, clearly she wants it, which is just so messed up. You know why she's dressed like that? Because she thinks she looks good in that. And you know what? You're noticing her. So she's picked an outfit that got your attention. It got her attention.
Or how about if she looks at you and you're like, you turn to your boy and you're like, yeah, she wants me. She looked at you.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean,
or she touches you, right? Now we're in a whole new ballgame. Oh, she just touched me. She wants me. No, you know what she did? She was being a human being and giving you contact, like she was having communication with you with physical contact. That happens to human beings all the time. But we create the messed up story because our ego likes to believe it's true. And that's where we're dangerous, is the ego, because we want to believe the greatest story possible for ourselves. And the ego will feed that story to us. They want you, go for it. And then we get arrogant and believe the ego. Make the move, they don't want it. Now we've done something to someone they don't want done. All from a story we created in our heads, and then people try to blame the other person when you chose to touch them. It's one thing we explain to people all the time. You can never blame a survivor for one reason. If you didn't touch the survivor, if you didn't sexually advance with that survivor, we're not having a conversation. It was your sexual contact that causes all of this. Without it, we don't even have a conversation. They could have dressed that exact same outfit. They could have walked in naked. If you don't do that, there's no sexual assault. It wasn't because of what they were dressed, what they were acting, what they were doing. The only way a sexual assault occurs is because someone commits a sexual assault.
You were pioneering this movement early on, back in the day. Talk about your experiences in those days on the front lines. Like, you talk about, she's wearing this, she must want it. Like, you must have really had some really good examples of these situations, like early on, before the movements that we're having now. Like, I could see this happening, in the 90s and late 80s, like guys just sitting by the water cooler just being, look at her, she wants me, or vice versa.
Yeah. Oh, I'd have people in the middle of an audience, Trey, in the middle of 500 people, raise their hand to tell me, look, if they came back to my place, they know what they're getting. They're proudly yelling that in front of 500 people. And I'll go, they know what they're getting. What do you mean by that? They know they're getting laid. They know they're having sex. And I went, whoa, whoa, whoa. So you're saying if they come back to your place, they don't have a choice. So they should assume you're a rapist.
Wow.
And they're like, and what's scary is the people that would sit there and go, well, they came back to my place. Now, the difference is nowadays, people know not to make those comments. They know that that is not okay. The scary part is there's some that still believe it. And so that's the scary part, is that now people know the right answer to give. The question is their behaviors matching the right answer. I'll give you the classic example. You say to people, can a drunk person not of sound mind give consent? Everybody nowadays, they didn't 10 years ago, everybody nowadays yells, no way, they can't consent. All right. But who are they chasing at the bar at 2 a.m.? Well, the drunk one who's good looking and drunk. Okay. So our behaviors are not matching what we're giving for answers. That's the shift that has to happen in society. We have to live these values, not just give them as the right answers.
How much pushback did you receive back then?
Oh, a lot. And I want to be clear. I appreciate you saying I was a pioneer, but to be fair, there were people doing this work way before me, particularly women doing this work way before most men were doing this work and not getting hurt. And so, to be fair, in many ways, it was easier for me as a man, if I'm being honest, because people would go, oh, a guy is saying this. Oh, wow, that's interesting. When a woman was saying it, some people would be like, well, of course she's saying it. She's a woman. Or another group's going, yeah, of course she's saying it. She's probably a survivor. Which these are unfair analysis taking place purely based on the container that I appear in or that person appears in. And I mean, container could be ethnicity, culture, race, gender, sexual orientation. So I always try to be very careful because I would get that early on. People go, it's so great you're a man doing this work. But they didn't say it to the woman. And so I always tell people, if somebody comes up to you and you're a man doing this work and they think it's so great you're a man doing this work, I'll say to them is, I appreciate that, but keep in mind that men should be insulted by that statement because it implies I'm the unicorn. I'm the only one that exists, or I'm one of few that care, when many men do care, many women do care. And we need to draw out of this phase of, oh, because you're a guy, it's more special, or that you're saying this, and just say, hey, let's stop going down that road. And let's say, are we listening to every human being? Are we respecting every human being for what they're bringing to the table? But yes, your question was pushback. And absolutely, there was pushback. I'd get people stand up in the middle of an audience. I mean, this is 15 years ago, and say, well, if that happened, they deserved it. In front of 500,000 people. And you'd go, they deserve what? Whatever they got. They didn't even care. Like they weren't even specific. Right. And then when you broke it down, they'd always back off. Because that's what I would do. I just break it down and go, all right, let's pause here. What are we talking about? All right. And as soon as you start to break it down, the person who made that announcement's realizing, wait a second, I'm on an island. This whole room is turning on me right now. What did I say that was wrong? And they're having a self-evaluation take place. And they recognize, you know what? I don't want to be the person that I am representing right now. I need to reevaluate what I just said. And that's where transformation takes place. If we just go, oh, every time somebody pushes back against me, I'm going to shut them down, we don't create any change in the world because that person keeps going with their beliefs. And what changed? Nothing. We're trying to create change. So when people push back, we have to engage instead of shutting down.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I come from a very, very blue collar background, and I've seen it firsthand where people have been, I guess, their whole career spent in the blue collar realm, and they're kind of like these, like the females are definitely desensitized to the males just because they've been in that environment for so long. They've just had to adapt, and I think it's totally unfair. Because they're just used to it, and so when something is said in that when something is said that is kind of uncomfortable, they just write it off as, well, this, we've been doing this for 30 years. She should be used to it. Like that's just kind of insulting to me.
Oh yeah. And what's tough is we also fail to give people in society skills to speak up in that moment. So everybody stays quiet out of fear of saying the wrong thing. And one thing that we teach people is, look, if you say the wrong thing, at least you said something. It's okay to say the wrong thing. Like maybe you're going to intervene and say the wrong thing, but it'll still tell the person you intervened for, they're going to see somebody who cared speak up. And they're going to know somebody supports them. Versus when nobody speaks up because they're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. And that person still feels like, yeah, here we go again. I'm still on that island we've been on for 30 years, like you just brought up. This is what I have to deal with. This is to survive. I have to put up with that, which is horrible. Nobody should have to put up with that. So what we have to tell anybody listening is when you see that, when you see somebody making a comment that is just rude, inappropriate, it lacks respect, it degrades, just tell yourself, what am I thinking right now? And if I don't think that maybe it's the perfect answer, at least it's an answer for the person who's going through this to see somebody cares. And I need to say something.
I think it really tests your character too. I think it tests your integrity.
You do. Yes, it does. Right? Because we've all not spoken up in life at times. I don't care who you are as a human being. I've never met a person who always spoke up in every situation. And when you learn to speak up, it bothers you when you don't, which is a great test of character. Because then it's bothering me. I didn't say anything. Now I know I've raised my character. When I can walk away and it didn't bother me and I didn't say anything, I haven't challenged my character enough. Yeah, that was too easy for me to walk away and not say anything. What do I need to work on here? Because it shouldn't be that easy.
So you do a lot of work with military, universities. You have some online training courses. You have a podcast.
We have two books. One book is a book of survivors sharing their stories. That's called Voices of Courage.
What is the name of the book?
It's 10 identifies women, 2 identifies men. My sister Sherry is one of the survivors in that book. And then the other book is Can I Kiss You? And that's our how-to book on dating, intimacy, relationships, gives exact wording to use in different situations, brings up a lot of scenarios, what-if scenarios, and how to handle those moments. And that's the book that when people think of our work, they think of that book because that really encompasses our book. Our work and what we teach. The survivors, we are really big believers in teaching to support survivors. So Voices of Courage brings home the strength and the power in the voices of survivors. It's just so powerful that way. So they're two very different books.
What is your meaning to life? Everybody asks themselves, what is the meaning of life? And I'm trying to flip the question around and direct it towards myself as far as taking responsibility to my meaning to life. Like, what is your meaning to life right now?
Well, what I know is I know my unique ability. And Unique Ability is a book by the authors Waller, Waller, came from the Strategic Coach Program by Dan Sullivan. But I know my unique ability, and that takes some research and takes some digging. And my unique ability is to create aha moments that uncover discoveries. And that's been true and your unique ability shows up as a child and shows up as an adult. So I loved seeing the light bulb go off in people, whether I was performing as a child or when I'm speaking as an adult. So when I'm on this earth, my question is, where is my opportunity to create aha moments? And am I doing that? That uncover discoveries. That's my purpose. That's my mission for being here. Now, the 3 words that guide me in life, the 3 energies that drive me forward and progress me forward in life, for me, the words I've chosen are to explore, share, and love. Constantly be exploring, learning, be curious, and then share what you learn. Don't be selfish. Give back to the world and lead with love. Live with love for yourself, for those around you, for those you meet, for those you don't know.
Do you teach those examples to your 4 children?
Which examples?
Explore, share, and love.
Share love. So that is a discovery. That one, those 3 particular words, is something that I've really come to understand in my mission in the last year. My unique ability I discovered about 4 years ago. But the 3 words that really I feel align with me, define me, those 3 words, that's been this past year. I've had other words in the past, but I've always felt like it's just not there. And then these three, I'm like, oh, it's so true of me that if one of those are not happening, I feel out of alignment. I can see that. So I have to be careful. I have it engraved in my journal, those three words, so that when the journal's open and I'm writing, in the leather on the right, I can always see those words. So that's how pertinent I want them in my life, how prominent I want them in my life. And so the reason I don't teach them to my kids, I haven't so far, is that they're my words. Doesn't mean they're their words. So what I'd be more curious is, what do they see as their words? What do they see as what aligns with their energy forces? What drives them to move forward? I would be curious to have that conversation. And my kids are older. They're all adults. And I haven't, because it has been recent. And so you asking that provokes me a little bit. It would be interesting to hear what they would say.
That would be interesting. Like, I don't know. I kind of would love to be able to ask my kids that, but I don't. Maybe I might get a serious answer out of my son, but my daughter for sure would be up for that. She would definitely write some really inspiring short words, obviously. But my son, he'd probably goof around and say, but or something like that.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what. The younger you have those conversations, though, the easier it is to keep them going. And so I was not as far along the self-development side for me. Outside of my topic, now in my topic I was, but outside of my topic, I wasn't as far along 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And so I didn't have some of these skills myself, understanding those three words, my unique ability. I didn't have that for myself even at the time. So you can't teach what you don't have. And now my kids are adults, so it's a little harder sometimes because you didn't start with those conversations. So I would say the good news is, Trey, is that you can start with these conversations, and even if it's once a year to have them, your kids will become used to having this exploration with you. That could be fun.
That's a great point. I mean, getting in there early, starting the communication line, creating that comfort of relaying your emotions and feelings towards your kids. Sometimes it can be hard. I mean, you want to be this hero, you want to be this strong figure in their life, but you got to show them that you're vulnerable. You got to show them that you're human too, and it's okay. It's okay to talk about things that bother you and be open to experiences and experience it with them.
Oh my goodness. So
it makes them grow too.
I have my oldest son has a baby due this summer, him and his partner. And so, yes. And so we were talking recently, the two of them, him and I were out, and we were talking about parenting. And she was saying that, it can be scary to think, you're bringing a baby into the world. And I talked very openly about, well, you're going to make mistakes. I've made plenty. And actually, my son and I could even talk about, hey, I remember I talked about this. I remember you being uncomfortable. He's like, oh yeah, I was uncomfortable. Like, we can look back on that and discuss that and know, yeah, I wonder how could I have done that better? For you, like what could have worked? Because you're going to make errors along the path. There is no manual for parenting that's going to work with every child. What's amazing, if you have enough kids, you'll know you can say the exact same thing to two kids. One totally hears you. One thinks, what are you talking about? They do not, they're like you're on two different planets. And it's not that the one that heard you was being a better child. It's that you failed to connect with the other one. And what we tend to do is, oh, that child's so hard to get through. And instead of going, what is it going to take for me to connect with that child? Instead of making it about the child being a struggle, what do I need to do better to connect with that child?
Well, connection, that's a huge part of it. Like, all right, so you're a busy guy. Like, you have a lot of stuff going on, right? So, growing up as a father, growing up raising your children, like, did you have a routine to connect with them weekly, daily? What did that look like?
Mine, I was on the road a lot. So it's going to sound silly, but I would have friends that would be in, sometimes somebody would be at a conference and you'd be hanging out in your hotel room together. And my friends would see it happen at the time. I would call home and I'd ask to talk to each of the boys at night before I got off the phone. And it sounds silly, but this is what we'd do. I would give them a, which was a hug, but I would literally make that sound because we didn't have FaceTime, right? So you'd go, and kiss, so can I have a hug and a kiss? And right. And then you, and they would do it back. And I would have friends watching this who didn't have kids that age yet. And they're like, oh my God, that's so awesome. Like just watching that take place. That is so awesome. But it was our little thing. And it's something that we did. Now, that doesn't mean when they were 15, that was happening as much anymore. So, but it was a way when they were younger. My wife and I would both do, with every child, a mom's day out and a dad's day out. So you got some one-on-one time with just you and that child for a whole day. So, you know, whether you wanted to go an hour away to the big city or do something exciting, but whatever it was, that was routine that we had. So you try to create things that can create that connection and that bonding.
Mike Domitrz, how do we connect with you? What's the best place to go? How can people reach out to you?
Center for Respect. So when you think of social media, put in Center for Respect. If you're thinking of a website, centerforrespect.com. On YouTube, it's youtube.com, Center for Respect. On Twitter, it's Center Respect, because Twitter doesn't allow that long of a username. On Facebook, it's Center for Respect. So, you know, facebook.com/Center for Respect. If they want to hear our podcast, it's the Respect Podcast. So it's consistency. As far as you're going to look up the Respect Podcast with Mike Domitrz, you'll find and every Wednesday our show comes out. And so we love engaging in these conversations. And our show talks about respect and exploring it in work, love, and life.
So at the very end of my show, I like to kind of have the guest give me like a little pep talk and directly to the listener. Imagine that the person listening to this podcast right now is a father or a mother or a partner who is struggling through let's just say they're growing with their children. They're at a point where they are rebelling and they're exploring, I guess, teenage dating, and the parents or the partners don't really know necessarily how to deal with that. They don't know how to have that conversation. What would your advice be to them?
Yeah, I would say for the mom and dad listening in that situation, what are you doing right now to give your kids the skills, whether they do what you hope or they do the opposite of what you hope? What skills are you giving them for both situations? Since you're scared about which road they're going to take here, give them the skills for both roads. That way, if they do take the one you're scared of, they're more likely to make better choices even on that road. If you sit there and go, don't go down that road, don't go down that road, they might go down the road. Because they're not you. They're themselves. So now they need the skills. And if you go, well, now that you're down the road, here's what you need to do. They're not going to listen then, right? Because you just told them don't go on the road for 2 years or for a year or for 6 months. So what you want to be able to say is, look, you're going to make choices. And I'm hoping you'll make choices that take you down a path of respect and dignity. And if you ever find you're on a path that you don't feel that's true, here's skills I want you to have, no matter what path you're on, to be able to identify whether you're being treated with respect, whether you're giving your partner respect, whether you feel comfortable with what's happening, that you always deserve to have a freedom of choice, that there should never be pressure to do something you don't want to do. This is all important. I want you to have these skills no matter what path you choose. That way you're empowering your kids for life, not just for this week. Because one thing that parents will forget is they'll think, well, I don't want my kids to engage in sexual activity. Well, they're saying that at 15. But they do want their kids to have a healthy sex life at 24 or 30 or 40. Who's giving them the skill set? You have the ability to give them the skill set for a lifetime skill that's going to be very important in their lives potentially.
But I feel like they don't even know how to give it to them, right? Like, what is a resource they can use?
Well, I mean, if they want a very direct resource from us, it would be our DVD for parents. So we have a DVD for parents called Help My Teen is Dating. It literally gives them how to have the conversations. Now, what it's not giving them is to talk about the biology, because you can get that anywhere. I mean, seriously, anywhere. Planned Parenthood has great resources on how to talk biology of sexuality, you know, where a penis goes, well, how a vagina works, all of these things. Planned Parenthood has incredible numbers of resources on that. If you want to learn how do I engage the teen in these conversations so they're not rolling my eyes, our DVD would probably be the best thing for that. Otherwise, letting your kid read our book, because the book is written for the kid, the DVD is made for the parent. So they're different audiences there. But that is the key. And for any parent going, I don't even know how to have that conversation, that tells you how important it is for you to have it. Because if you don't have it, you know your kids aren't going to get this somewhere else because you didn't get it. So now you become their only option. If you don't do this now, they're going to turn to porn if they haven't already, or they're going to turn to their friends. I'd rather have it be you than porn or their friends.
Absolutely. Mike, I want to say that this has been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show, brother.
Well, thank you, Trey. This has been an awesome interview. You really dive deep. I appreciate that.
I want to say thank you to Mike Domitrz for joining the show. I want to say thank you to the listener for listening and hanging out with us today. If this is the first time listening to the podcast, please hit subscribe and leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcast from. It helps us find those who are in need of motivation. If you want to get on my email list, you can go to yoursuperiorself.com and sign up to get all the episodes, blog posts, and news about the podcast sent directly to your inbox. Or if you don't want to go to the website, you can text the word superior to 444-999, and that would automatically sign you up for my email list. Guys, this has been a pleasure. I love creating these episodes for you. I love hanging out with you guys each week. So please help spread the podcast. All right, guys, this has been fun. This has been awesome. This has been amazing. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will talk to you later.